bum.
Is that Batman?
Terminator.
Oh, Terminator.
I was trying to do a what is it? Little red herring for
Like-
the audience, the visual learners.
See the title.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, but it's funny if Interstellar leads with Terminator theme song for the Spotify listeners.
unless I just cut this entire opening bit out.
Yeah, please do. What's up, people of the interwebs? It's your boys and female. Sorry, lady. Sorry.
Whatever.
She's one of the boys.
I feel like that still applies.
Yeah, fair enough. We are here once again in holy matrimony to surprise, you guys are getting married.
Hold
No, we are here because today is a very, very special birthday to me, at least. This might be the end of the podcast,
I won't
at
be
least
coming
in terms
back.
of Claire's contributions.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. We are here to discuss the 10-year anniversary of Interstellar, a movie that I think me and James have talked plenty of times. So, for most of our opinions, just go back and watch our Christopher Nolan
Previous.
pod we did last year.
And for those of you who watch and may not know them IRL, don't worry. They talk about it just as much in person.
Yeah. But anyways, for those maybe who don't want to go back and listen, what are you two's history with the movie?
James, why don't you start us off?
I saw it in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
I knew who Christopher Nolan was,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew to expect good things.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked away feeling like I got good things out of it. Many of the initial criticisms that came about this movie, I didn't agree with, like the poor acting. Although this was 2014, I was in high school. What did I know about acting? The scientific accuracy. Again, I was in high school. What did I know about black holes?
Yeah.
I just thought that the use of time travel to tell a story was something I hadn't seen before previously. And I enjoyed it for that reason, including the fourth dimension sequence. To me, that was the most mind-blowing part of the film. And so I walked away enjoying it, thinking that it was just a good science fiction film. Turns out nobody else enjoyed it. They thought it was too long. They thought the acting was terrible, and that the science wasn't accurate enough in their opinion. So I enjoyed it, but in terms of Christopher Nolan's au revoir, I kind of, purposely didn't put it as high as I thought other people would respect me for thinking,
That's fair.
as opposed to, say, The Dark Knight.
You were trying to be the counter to the counterculture.
Yeah.
You were like, I like this movie, but nobody else around me seems to like it, so
Yeah.
I am gonna say I don't like it.
Yeah.
Well, at that point, everybody loved The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
That was Christopher Nolan's claim to fame, and the reason why anybody was even in film school.
Knew his
at the time.
name.
Yeah,
That and Inception. Yeah.
and Inception, which, I mean, I loved every film from him that I had seen at that point, and I had watched all of his films by that point too, even stuff like Insomnia. So I knew that I liked Christopher Nolan. I knew that I liked Interstellar. It just seemed like, for the most part, for some reason, people just didn't like this film as much as I did, and that didn't make any sense to me. And then all of a sudden, hey, it's the 10-year anniversary. This is the greatest science fiction film
Yeah.
that has ever come out.
All the
And I'm
TikTokers
like,
and Redditors are coming out.
where were you guys 10 years ago?
It's funny you say that though, because you look at how much money this movie has made, and you're like, it almost made $1 billion.
Yeah.
Like, how? And I think a lot of that is just it's Nolan, it's McConaughey, it's space, it's cool. Hans Zimmer's on the score.
Yeah.
It's just concepts that we as humans
Well, everybody loves those. Yeah.
don't really understand, but love to see visualized, at least in different ways. And I think it was just the perfect recipe to make what could be his magnum opus. We'll get to that in a little bit. Claire, what is yours?
So I have a kind of almost like a foil how James had it introduced, because like to me, I have heard it been talked about for ages. Everybody, to me, I always had heard that it was fantastic. Everybody loved Interstellar, blah blah blah. And so I think when I started hanging out with you guys more, and we started doing more of like bringing me on the pod and stuff, Isaac was like, "You got to watch this." He's like, "If you want to understand movies, you got to watch Interstellar." And it was pitched as like it's like one of the greatest sci-fis of all time. I was like, that's a high bar for me. And then it was like, and it's one of the most scientifically accurate sci-fis of all time. And I was like, all right. that was
There's like 3 scenes that aren't, but yeah.
The moment you said that was when like immediately I was like, I'm gonna walk out of this film, and regardless of how much I enjoy it, I'm gonna start shitting on it. Because as you guys know, and as the audience might have finally picked up by now, I like space a lot. So you guys sat me down and I watched it, and it was fantastic. I think it's a wonderful film. Yeah, I have my comments about certain scientific accuracy things, but
Sure.
it's science fiction.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's points where you have to suspend disbelief because otherwise it's not an interesting story. And it's like a lot of the stuff that they talk about, we don't actually know how it works. We just have mathematical models. And it's like, well, the theory says X. Who cares? Like, get over yourself.
Theory can only get you so far.
Yeah, I'm like, and it's just, it's super cool. It's just a cool damn movie. And I give Isaac a lot of crap about it because I like to make Isaac mad.
I recognize that you're trolling.
Yeah, it's just
It's funny. I do the same
yeah.
with you, vice versa with games.
Yeah, it's how we just bait each other.
Yeah. Very good at that.
But yeah, I mean, I walked away from it being like, wow, this is pretty good. I think Interstellar and The Godfather were the ones you guys showed me. I was like, all right, you know what? Maybe I should give a little bit more credit to movies than I did before. Like,
turns out guys who studied it for 4 years kind of, sort of, a little bit at
maybe
least
know what you're talking about.
Sometimes know what they're talking about. Not all the time. There's definitely kids who I know that studied it for 4 years, and I'm like, you're an idiot when it comes to movies.
I don't like giving you guys too much credit, but I mean, maybe you know what you're talking about.
So going into this movie, you knew nothing about Christopher Nolan. You knew nothing about.
I still don't know anything about Christopher
Yeah.
Nolan.
Have you seen any of his other works? There's the Dark Knight trilogy.
I think I've seen the Dark
Christian
Knight.
Bale. There is.
I think
The
Frank made us watch the Dark Knights.
There's Inception. Inception's always the
Never
one that
seen
most people
Inception.
know. There sounds like an opportunity for a podcast here.
Well, I mean, we talked about it last week, I think. You're like, you've never seen Inception?
Oppenheimer came out recently.
Yeah.
You guys know I haven't seen Oppenheimer.
I thought you had them.
I have not.
Dunkirk.
I told
Tenet.
them to, and then she was like, "No, I'm not going to." In spite, and I was like, "All right, fair enough."
Yeah, and I just have not sat down to do it since. Because I was like, I'm going to watch it at home so I can like take breaks because a 3-hour sitting still for 3 hours is a long time for me.
It doesn't feel like 3 hours. I'll be honest with you.
But you've certainly heard of Christopher Nolan and some of his trademark
Yeah, I know you gu's.
techniques, and I mean, I'm sure you've
She
seen
watches the
online
pod.
discussion as well.
No, I mean, I don't go to the online discussion places, James. Not for movies, at least.
R/movies.
Yeah.
No.
I frequent it. I like to see what the other half is saying.
If it pops up like on like the front page, sure, but
YouTube comments.
Never mind.
But like I kind of like after I had watched it and stuff, I've obviously heard you guys talk about Christopher Nolan stuff, but like like with a lot of our director conversations, I'm not versed enough to really make comments about it. Where it's just like I don't remember these people enough.
Yeah.
There are obviously outliers that we've talked about before and stuff, but like, especially back then, you guys were like, "Oh, it's a Nolan film." I'm like, "Congrats."
Does it mean anything to you?
Yeah.
Nolan North.
Yeah.
I mean, like it works with authors too, because you and I have had conversations about. You're like, it's from like X author that made
I'm
like,
very bad with all this.
all these things, and I'm like, I don't care. Is the book good? Yes or no? Like,
If you give me their works, I'll be like, "Oh yeah, I know that." But if you're like, "Hey, have you heard of Andrew Simonson?" I'm like, "Who?"
yeah, and you're like, oh,
Oh, he just wrote, The Road. It's like, "Oh, yeah, okay."
it's like this person wrote like all your favorite novels, and it's like that's just a coincidence. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, if it's not a YA or teen fantasy author,
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, exactly.
I think it says a lot more about me, actually. Now that
I
I'm
mean,
thinking
I'm
about
not
it.
saying otherwise.
I'm the only one who's different with that.
Yeah.
So then, in the scope of science fiction,
Mhm.
just as a genre,
Yeah.
The way that Interstellar engages with not just obviously black holes and time dilation,
Mhm.
but also the fourth dimension.
Mhm.
Like I said, that was the most mind-blowing part of this film because at that point, at least when I was in high school, that was an interesting topic of conversation sometimes.
Yeah.
It would be, what does the fourth dimension look like? How would you represent something like that? I don't know if many other people my age were thinking those kinds of questions, but certainly,
They weren't.
you watch a minute physics video or two, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And so seeing it represented as he did in the film was like, this is like what movies are about. Seeing,
Yeah.
like, being able to represent something that you've never seen before.
Yeah.
That, to me, so cool. Now, I wasn't a big fan of science fiction books but given that you are, how do you see the actual representation of not just space, but astrophysics
Mhm.
compared to say like Revelation space or God forbid anything in the universe?
So I've read a lot of different descriptions of what like the fourth dimension would be like.
Mm-hmm.
It's played with a ton, especially I think after this movie came out. And I mean, obviously before people talked about it a lot too, but like I feel like Interstellar helped bring it more to the fore in a lot of people's minds. So a lot of books post Interstellar
Mm-hmm.
cover a lot.
The
A lot
one
of
that-
short stories and stuff too.
I was going to say short stories. The one that comes to mind is the one that Arrival is based on,
Yeah.
which isn't necessarily fourth dimension, quote unquote, but it still plays with like a different conception of time.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, yeah.
And I mean, like, one of my favorite novels that I mentioned here, Children of Time, is about how time affects things. It's not as direct as, like, I'm flying through the tesseract of time itself. But, like, I've always loved the concept of time. When I was a kid, my father forced me to sit down and watch, like, full-length essays on the theory of relativity and quantum physics, which is why I, like, know so much about them.
I just did that on my own.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the first one he was like, "You're gonna watch this," and then like by like halfway through, I was like, "Okay, cool, I'm gonna watch the rest." But like, so I'd already kind of like grappled with these concepts by the time you guys showed me Interstellar, right? But like going back to where my headspace would have been when it came out, I think it does a great job of that kind of representation. I think it's because it's such an unknowable thing to us, it kind of lends itself to being able to do whatever you want with it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like I think if you're trying to do like Cthulhu mythos, where the concept of it is just you can't understand. So you can do whatever the hell you want because if it's weird, that's the point, right?
Interstellar is a Cthulhu mythos.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Interesting way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
well, I mean, if you go back and read some of those things, it's kind of the concept.
Yeah.
But like, so yeah, I mean, like, while I have my gripes with how the black hole is done, again, just baiting Isaac.
Here we go.
I think that the concept of how they showed him just like being able to interact with time in that sense, where it's because he's just in the center of something that is so utterly massive and gravitational that it just creates this space that you can do whatever you want with because nothing escapes it. So you can just be like, yeah, all time is here because all time hits it at some point because all light has to come here, and then it can't escape. And then it's and then like same thing with the wormhole because that's what they do to get to the other place at first. Wormholes are effectively time travel, which is kind of cool. And I felt like that was also pretty fun.
There's
This movie does a lot
definitely-
of really fun things, is what
Yeah.
it comes down to.
Okay, so now in terms of just actual movie,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we got the context for why we enjoyed this movie so much. Did you have a good time with it?
No, it was awful. I hated it.
Start at the opening. Right?
Yeah.
The movie begins.
Okay, yeah. So movie begins.
They're on the farm.
They're on a
Mhm.
farm.
It's dusty.
It's
Mhm.
dusty.
Matthew McConaughey, his character. I mean, in science fiction films, you typically will have like I feel like that's a pretty stock character for the most part. Especially him being a retired pilot. I
Yeah.
mean, that's straight from NASA history anyway.
It's I think all the characters are very like stereotypical.
Yeah.
And like even in a sense of like the setting and the concept of like the Earth is dying, we have to go somewhere else is like the basis of at least 50% of all science fiction stories. Like
Yeah.
If Earth isn't dying in your story, are you even writing
yeah.
science fiction?
if Earth isn't dying in your story, then guess what? By the end of it,
Yeah.
you're going to kill it.
If the Earth isn't dying, then at least the sun is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some part of humanity has already
Or there's an
suffered
there's an
catastrophe.
alien.
Yeah.
Yeah. All science fiction novels can be sorted into two categories, and it's a Venn diagram where it's either the Earth is dying or we've encountered aliens for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so like when it started, I was like, oh, this is pretty like by the numbers almost.
Mhm.
It was still cool because like, again, there's a million of those stories, so you kind of just learn to like appreciate what people do with them. The idea that like, oh, humanity has been hit and dying, and so we revert back to like farming mythos and stuff is kind of fun. And then just
Only
like
the 1% go to college.
yeah, like it because a lot of times sci-fi stories it's oh, everybody's like dying, there's horrible things. We're gonna uplift humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I appreciate when they flip the script and it's like, oh, everybody's dying. Well, back to the caves with you. It's like, yeah, that's probably what'll happen. Like,
What is it? Man reverts the monkey.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so like, that opening was pretty good. And then the way they just like introduced the problem and the solution is also pretty fun. Of just like, all right, we got to get out of here.
Mhm.
Humanity can't live here. Pretty standard. So we're gonna fly through a wormhole that we found because, stars are dilating around a space that doesn't exist.
Before we get to that, though, we're introduced to Murph
Mm-hmm.
and the sand on her bookshelf,
Yeah.
the ghost, I
Mhm.
think they call it.
Yeah.
I haven't seen this film since the last time we saw it, so
This was
I'm
like a
just
year ago.
remembering. Yeah. I mean, what do you think of her character? At least as a kid, the precocious child. Pretty common for Christopher Nolan. He really likes his smart characters, regardless of what age they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like,
Characters who were obsessed. I
Yeah.
think you brought up that point.
Oh
one
yeah,
time.
obsession. Definitely.
Yeah.
That's a Nolan trait.
I think it was she's a character that is made better at the end. Because at the start you're just like, yeah, it's a smart aleck kid who kind of knows everything, whatever. Everybody knows that person. And like the ghost thing with the dust or whatever, you're just like, okay. Like it doesn't make sense at the time. You're just like,
Yeah.
all right,
Well,
whatever,
it's not supposed to. Yeah.
Kids are kids. Exactly, yeah. Like kids are
It's
kids,
a,
whatever.
breadcrumb.
It's a Chekhov's
Foreshadowing.
gun. Yeah. Chekhov's WMD. So yeah, so you're just like, she's just there to me at the beginning. That's what it felt like. 'Cause I was like, oh yeah, it's a reason to give our character like stakes,
Mhm.
because if he didn't have a daughter to worry about, then the whole like, oh, I don't know if I want to go, or like, I don't know if I can do this kind of thing kind of falls flat.
I think it's more so the I'm gonna come back.
And that too, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Stay.
there's no
Boom,
stakes
boom.
for the rest of the journey.
Boom, boom.
So like to me that's all it was. I was like, always got to have a family so that the DM has something to kill, kind of. And my fellow DMs, you understand, but so it was very just like, yeah, whatever.
Very dismissive.
Well, because like I said, like I'm just like,
Never mind. It's a central string of the
to
entire
be fair,
movie.
this is Nolan we're talking about.
Yeah.
We have criticized his characterization in almost all of his films previously. He's not the strongest character director, in my opinion.
and also you were asking how I felt at the start.
Yeah.
Obviously, my opinions and everything after
Well-
the end are vastly different.
But
But
these
like,
are also the main characters. You're getting
Yeah.
introduced to them for the first
Uh-huh.
time.
Yeah.
It's understandable.
You have to
I
like
think.
them.
And I could definitely think the first time I watched the film, I was like, okay, there's a ghost in her room. When are we going to get to that?
Mhm.
Go to space already. Just explain that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't care about, the state.
The movie just transitions to her being. It's an episode of Ghost Adventures.
Yeah.
That's why James was excited.
Yeah, probably.
But, that was at least my expectation at that time was, all right, when is Nolan going to do the cool stuff?
Mhm.
Get these characters out of the way. Let them have their hysterics.
And I think also there was the difference between you watched it when you were like 16
Mhm.
and I watched it when I was 25. And I have consumed an infinite amount of media at this point regarding all of this. So I
Yeah.
was just like, all right, checkbox, checkbox, checkbox,
Yeah.
checkbox. Like,
For sure.
some of this stuff to you at the time was very new. Whereas like when I watched it, I'm like, and you said you didn't read a lot of sci-fi. That's what I'm saying. Like you didn't indulge in a lot of sci-fi stuff. So like, I look at a ghost in a sci-fi movie and I'm like, it's probably some space bullshit.
Okay, I knew. Well, I didn't read or watch much science fiction. I still knew tropes and storytelling techniques.
Yeah. But like, yeah. So that's how I feel about
So I'm not a fan of Murph, is what I'm taking.
at the start. I kind of didn't care. It wasn't necessarily I wasn't a fan. I was just like, that's not
It's
why
a child.
That's not why I'm here. Is really
Yeah.
what it was. Yeah. It was. I knew at the back of my mind that probably something was going to come back to this, but that seemed to be the entire crux of the story was leaving to come back for the younger generation. So I was like, I can shove her from my mind up until she's important to the story. And I'm here for space. Like,
Yes.
as in all of these long ass movies you guys send me, a lot of the opening sequence, I'm like, can we just get to the good stuff, please?
That is the good stuff. All
I
of
was
it's
like,
the
I
good
understand why it exists, and I know I need it, but like, come on, like.
stuff. Thoughts?
we're here for her.
Yeah. Am I baiting Isaac? Is this how I feel? You be the judge of that.
I will not. We'll move on. They go to space.
I mean, there's so many good scenes in the beginning.
yeah.
I know. No, there's good stuff.
There's the scene where they stay at the principal's office. There's the cornfield chase.
The
There's
cornfield
the
chase
opening
scene.
breakfast. I love that opening breakfast scene. There's so many little moments in there where I'm like, yeah, this feels like a real family. They fight and they quarrel over little things. They still give each other life lessons, and I'm like, yes, this is what I want.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
So they go to space.
They go to space.
We're missing a lot.
You know what I mean.
I mean, we're doing brackets. I'm not going to
Yeah.
sit here for 3 hours and digest
Dissect
every
every
part of a
single
movie that I
scene.
haven't watched in a year.
I'm mostly still just focusing on characters.
Yeah.
Because Anne Hathaway comes next.
Mhm.
She's probably, other than the main, McConaughey and Jessica Chastain, Anne Hathaway is easily the next biggest character in the story.
Yeah.
In terms of her role to play. She received the most criticism for her performance, though, I think,
Understandable.
when this initially came out.
I'm trying to. Her role kind of blurs from my mind a lot, so she probably didn't do a very good job impressing on me.
She's literally next to him.
The
I
entire
know,
time.
that's why I'm like, it kind of bothers me.
She's literally there. She's the last person you see.
Let me
You
let
probably
me
remember Tars the robot more than you do her.
let me put it this way. When I rewatched some scenes this morning to like re-jog my memory about some things that I knew I wanted to like that you guys are gonna ask me about, the first sequence when I'm watching it and it cuts to her character, I was like, Anne Hathaway was in this. And I was like, oh no.
Does she have much agency in this movie?
I mean, she's trying to find her lost lover
yeah.
in space. That's really her reason. We don't really know that till the end
Mhm.
of why she's so
Edmund,
w-
Dr. Edmund.
obsessed with going to that one planet,
hmm
which funny enough, is actually the planet that is the best for them. But other than that, no, not really. She's just like, I need to get to this planet to find my lover,
Mhm.
and that's it.
I mean, that feels pretty basic.
And she has the love
Speech.
soliloquy in the
Yeah.
middle of the monologue in the middle of the movie, where it kind of, I can agree with people why they would turn off of the movie at that point. 'Cause
Yeah.
you start feeling like it's a Hallmark movie with that monologue.
Has anybody done a Hallmark movie in space yet? There's an idea.
There's
There's
Probably.
got to be plenty,
probably
right?
something in the works.
Sure. Yeah.
If not, get the writing.
I almost said The Martian.
Yeah,
Just to make it
there's your
fair.
Hallmark. There's your Hallmark movie.
True.
Anyway. John Carter of Mars. That's what it was.
So depending on how you define a Hallmark movie, a lot of things could fit in that.
Yeah, Transformers: Dark Side of the Moon,
Let's say The Expanse.
Oh,
But
I love the Pink Floyd. Anyway.
or Dark of the Moon, I guess.
So, do you feel like though Nolan's attempts at fitting that theme of love, love conquers all, quote unquote, in the middle of a film that, uses real scientific formulas in order to create its CGI effects and has this entire sequence where they explore the fourth dimension
Mhm.
in a way that takes itself extremely seriously?
Yeah.
Do you feel like those are kind of at conflict to an extent? Like he's almost being like, oh crap, I wrote this movie about just cool science facts. We have to like still have some emotion in here. Just give her a big speech.
No, because I feel like it was peppered there in the beginning. I feel like he wrote this as a love letter to his kids. So,
Yeah.
like, I
Mhm.
appreciate you and I would do anything for you. And so I feel like that theme is central to it. I think if you take out the monologue, a lot of people probably don't read love as the central theme
No.
until you watch a video essay, like a 14-minute video essay
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably why he rewrote. Just saying, this is like just thinking like he probably wrote that scene so that way it's easier for people to. It's more legible
Yeah.
for folks, because a lot of stuff is going on at one time, and then the whole ending
Mhm.
with the fourth dimension, it's like something like that. You kind of need to be more concise.
Mhm.
I just hate the actual monologue. It's so cheesy.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with that because it's like, because to me like the Hathaway story isn't as much of like the love conquers all takeaway as it is the literally going through time to tell your child how to save humanity kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But like, a lot of people as they're watching a person dip into a black hole probably were just like checking out.
Yeah.
Not in the sense of like, wow, like I think this is stupid. Just like, I am no longer comprehending anything that's happening.
What are we doing?
So like, you'd probably just be like, oh yeah, he was the ghost, like haha, funny.
Yeah.
And like that would be like where I think some people just cut out. So as I was saying, just without that like extra like, this is about doing things, whatever it takes to save the people you love, kind of like could help fly over, because that's how he navigated the Tesseract anyway.
Yeah. One of the initial criticisms I heard about this film after watching it was that there were, like, oh, if this movie is about, time dilation in space, why does he spend so much time with his kids in the beginning? And that just didn't make any sense to me. Why would you feel like that was... I'm like, did
How
you not
dare he
watch
be a
the
good
film?
father?
Yeah.
It was like, why do you dedicate so much time to the relationship between McConaughey and Murr if, they barely get to see each other by the end? And I'm like, my brother in Christ, did you watch the movie?
Yeah.
You had 3
That's
hours to
terrible.
pay attention.
This is what I think media literacy is dying.
I mean, this was like back in 2014,
Yeah.
so it was
Yeah.
it's been dead
It's
for a
been
while.
dying since then, my
I
guy.
think it's dying.
I do want to say though, I don't get the criticism about Nolan that there's a point where people don't understand what he's talking
His
about.
movies?
Yeah, I've never understood that.
I think when you go into watching his movies the first time, that's a valid criticism, because it's a lot of stuff going on, stuff's exploding, stuff's flying into stuff, a lot of words that aren't being fully understood just because his sound mixing is terrible.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like Tenet, you watch Tenet twice, you know what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, I watched it once and I knew what was
Yeah,
happening. They
yeah.
explain everything.
It's very
The man loves
easy.
exposition.
Yeah.
What do you mean you don't understand?
I've never understood that critique as well.
Yeah.
It's like, if you don't understand it, either go look up the Wikipedia,
Yeah.
read the plot, or just rewatch the movie.
Yeah.
The only Nolan movie I actually needed like supplementary material for was Memento, to see that chart of
Yeah.
like where the scenes are
Because
grafted
Inception,
out.
I remember watching it the first time, and I remember I watched it at ASU for the first time, and I remember people being like, "You're not gonna understand it. It's like so complex. It's the greatest plot twist of all time." And I watched it, and I was like, "No, it was pretty
Yeah.
understandable. Like
actually-
they're in 4 different locations. The 4 different locations represent
Yeah.
4 different levels of dreams. Like they're all kicking up at the same time."
Yeah. It's literally a linear story.
Yeah. And they're
Nothing
like,
changes.
They're like, "Well, the top doesn't spin or anything like that." I'm like, that's the point. Is it?
Yeah.
Does it? I don't know. Anyways.
It's almost like there's rules.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that's just personal gripe I have with the way that people talk about Nolan.
No, I can get that.
Yeah. Well, at least for this film, it's like, again, at that point in time, conversational black holes, I felt like people were super interested in that stuff.
Yeah.
So this movie was really timely in that.
Space was cool.
Yeah,
I think
space
that
was
was right
cool.
around the time SpaceX was
Mm-hmm.
coming back. So like,
Yeah.
it was on our CNN and
Yeah.
ABC News like every morning. Oh, they sent a rocket to space. The first time an American rocket's been to space since the 70s or I don't know,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And the fact that this movie also used real, like, mathematics equations
Yeah.
in order to create its CGI imagery about what
Mhm.
like a black hole would look like, which ended up being fairly accurate.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
I mean, I think people have said that like the way that the black hole is depicted in Interstellar like changed how people viewed them completely until we got the
Yeah.
actual picture.
Yeah, I never saw a black hole with having the
disc.
discs of light. Yeah, I knew of like the the horizontal plane or whatever, where you can orbit around safely and stuff like that. But I never knew there was actually light going around it, and you're like, oh, that makes sense because it's sucking up light. Like,
Yeah.
it would make sense that there would be wisps of light around it. It's cool. This one has full battery, so it should be good.
Oh, the camera just died.
That one's not dead. I charged that this morning.
I like that.
So they go to space.
They go to
Yeah.
space.
Now,
Space.
as they're flying through
Final Frontier,
the,
some would say.
some would
Stole my
say,
joke.
but you might get copywritten if you said that. So they're flying through the wormhole for the first time, and they have that scene where they kind of reach out to that ghost reaching the other end.
Yeah.
Do you remember what you were thinking in that moment?
I
when you
didn't
saw
even
it
know
the
what
first
that
time?
was until like I think literally the last time we saw it with you and Matt was the time when I was like, oh, that's her reaching out. I was
To
like,
him.
oh shit, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that I kind of like at the moment I was just like, wow, this is sick.
Yeah.
I think that was all that was going through my head. I was just like, because again, like this movie does a really good job of playing with how things should look, right? Because like you look at a lot of like how wormholes are depicted beforehand, it's just like,
Yeah. Take a piece of paper, fold it in half, and then stick a pencil through
yeah.
it.
Well, I mean, like,
What's the 3-dimensional object of a circle?
yeah.
Yeah.
people would, you'd see like a big circle with like maybe like a tube at the end of it, and it's like all blue, and like that's the wormhole. And then you go in, and it's like
Yeah.
and you go in, it's like whoa, blue area, and then you're on the other side, right? So like the fact that it was like actually like bending space the way that we understand wormholes should work, I thought was super cool. And I just at the entire sequence, I was just like, nice.
You know what's a really underrated director decision on that scene? No music.
Agreed.
Just purely the sounds
The
of the
sound
shuttle.
effects.
Just like
Just rattling, dealing with itself.
I mean, space is
beeping,
silent.
Tars is talking in the background. McConaughey's like, no, let me ride this thing. This is a goddamn Lincoln MX. I gotta ride it.
Sometimes you gotta go forward to go back.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, this is cool. This is a cool scene.
I thought it was aliens.
Oh yeah, sure, I can see that.
You know, because it's sci-fi. You're thinking, no, aliens. So yeah, that's what I thought at least.
I never knew. I don't know why I never,
never
thought
paid
it was
attention to
him
that?
until like the last time. And I remember that scene where he's doing it on his end, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool.
I think also part of it is because, I mean, obviously when you finally get to the scene where he does reach back out from the other side, you've already seen the Tesseract stuff.
Yeah.
So you know that like it's going to be,
He's messing with space.
yeah,
and time.
coming back in on itself in a very Nolan-esque way.
Yeah.
They get to the water planet.
Miller's Planet. It's been how long has it been on Miller's Planet since then?
I don't remember the exact years. I just remember being annoyed. This was my first like, all right, this is plot contrivance bullshit.
Like, this is a 3-hour-long film. They have to fill it with something.
Yeah, I think exactly because like, I mean, I'm not gonna get into it because it's a nitpick bias bullshit. I know that plot has to exist, but like, time dilation doesn't stop at the atmosphere. And every
know.
good scientist would understand that.
So it's literally just a plot contrivance, is what you. Is.
It's the fact that they flip and they're like, wow, this beacon has always been blinking good, and then like as they're going down, they're like, oh, it's actually been here for like, what was it, like 50 years or some crap? Because the time dilation is awful.
No, she's been pinging for 50 years.
Yeah.
But she landed like an hour ago on the.
That's right. Yeah.
On the planet or something like that. Yeah.
I had it flip flop.
Like she just literally landed right before she died, and then I don't know how. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean.
I know. Yeah, I just couldn't remember which direction it went.
Too deep in the weeds.
Yeah. You like as you're flying around the black hole, you'd experience discrepancies.
Yeah.
So like having a world being in there. First off, no. Why would you want to live on that? Being a world on the edge of a black hole.
It's the only 3 suitable worlds.
Yeah, it's the only 3 suitable
They
ones.
discovered. Listen, that
man.
world ain't gonna be around much longer than Earth is.
You take what you can get.
No other options. just cut that one out.
Well, the reason they picked that one was because of the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because she had pinged that they had water.
Yeah.
That's literally all she said.
Yeah, that's all she had was water. I think the waves was cool. I like the big 50-foot waves because like
Those
again,
are
it's
mountains.
You're being affected by insane gravity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely was the original. Like they should have had a moment of like, wait, we are on the accretion disk of a black hole. Things are already being affected by it. Maybe there's a reason. And also, orbital pictures. You can see if there's walls of water.
I just like the soundtrack in the scene.
Yeah. I mean,
The ticking.
The ticking of the clock.
Yeah.
again,
It's a good
like
scene.
there are things that in science
works.
fiction in general, you just kind of have to like be like, yeah, I'm gonna let that slide because
Yeah.
otherwise it's not fun. It's not cool. And that's one of those things where it's just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Like from a science standpoint, you're all idiots. But like it made for a really cool sequence. Like, and it's a really awesome shot. That landing, them being like, why is everything destroyed? Why is everything should be good? And then you see the water coming over, like,
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's at least the first. I think everything about that scene is really only there to reinforce time dilation, regardless of how scientifically accurate it is or not, because it comes up later on in the film, and it's important then. So they just have to bring it up, like really hammer it home here. They say something like, "Oh, every minute here is like some number of years."
hour, a couple hours,
Yeah.
years on Earth, yeah.
It's 1 hour,
7? I want to say
7 years.
Yeah. So everyone on Earth is a dog now, I guess. But
And like that kind of goes back to what I kind of mentioned earlier. I'm like, sometimes you have to be overtly direct
yeah,
to get your message across, because for some people it's like duh, like of
Yeah.
course is what you're talking about. Why are you being so direct about it? But for a bunch of others, it's like, oh, that's the moment they
yeah,
get it.
because they have not only the dialogue telling you that a minute here or an hour is 7 years on Earth or whatever, but then you have the guy up in the spaceship who is
Aging.
also aging. Then you have the soundtrack with the clock ticking, which is also reinforcing that element too. So it's like they're literally saying, just pay attention to this one story aspect
Yeah.
with this scene, and also let's kill off this other guy, get him out of here.
It's also there to show how green they are still, right?
Yeah.
Like they land and they're
Yeah.
immediately like, "Oh, we gotta go around.
We
and just
gotta help."
mosey around." And McConaughey's like, "Hey, you stay near the ship."
Yeah,
And then she's like, "I gotta grab it." And McConaughey's like, "No, you don't. We gotta go."
Mhm.
And that obviously ends up in the death of one of their own. And then they have a talk about like the math and how the math didn't work out to their favor. So like, there's reasons for the planet.
yeah.
There's no, I understand the reasons.
Yeah. I don't know how time dilation works. I'm not even gonna try and argue
Yeah.
with that on that.
Again, it's all theory. Like it's you
I
can-
know that if you're closer to larger things in more gravitational pull, time goes
slower.
slower.
That's
yeah.
the theory. Yeah.
Yeah.
At this point in the story, I think we have also been introduced to Jessica Chastain's character, Murph, grown up. She, I guess, went to college and now is working
Yeah, I mean, good
with
for her.
Michael Caine on these scientific experiments to bring him home. Another classic, that's the obsession coming through for Christopher Nolan. What do you think of her acting, her performance?
I love her in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at that point was when Mirth kind of came back on my radar. I was like, okay, there's something more here.
Mhm.
I wasn't sure what yet, but I was like, all right, you draw me back in. I understand now why we had this little bit of, lead up.
What about Michael Caine?
He's
Nolan,
just an
he's just there.
honorary actor at this
I don't
point. in his
remember him
career.
being
Yeah.
He's had a long and storied career in
It-
Hollywood. So
Yeah.
this is just, I think, Nolan being like, "You're my friend. I like seeing you on set."
It was definitely at this point, even watching this in theaters, I was like, he's been in the Dark Knight
Yeah,
movies. He's
yeah.
been in Inception. He's going to be here, Those two are two peas in the pod. But like her actual character story arc, do you still find that like not just as a natural progression of what we see of her childhood and her relationship to Matthew McConaughey, but like, I don't know, did it make sense to you?
Yeah.
The actual, I mean, like the physics of.
Oh, well, I mean, like,
Like, did she age that much, or?
I mean, like her
Just what she
whatever
was trying to
math she's trying to do.
I mean, at that point, you're getting into outside of theory and into actual like mathematics of it, where my
Yeah.
knowledge drops hard.
Well, I mean, you've been critiquing all of the other
yeah,
scientific.
because there are some things where I'm like, okay, at a theory level, you have screwed up royally,
Yeah.
but like, I can't comment on the actual math part of it.
Yeah,
because
you
I
want to
genuinely
solve the equation on the board?
No, I'm not asking that.
no. I can be like, oh yeah, like I know the theories about how like black holes and stuff work, so I can
Yeah.
tell you that like at X point, no, that shouldn't have happened. You should have done X, Y, Z instead. And then like whatever. I can't be like, oh yes, at 2 hours and 15 minutes in, he should have been accelerating at X equals my. I don't know.
They
man.
didn't hit Mach 1 by 17 seconds in
Yeah.
the flight pattern.
Yeah, they're not clearing space. Like
If X equals 7, what does Y equal?
Like I saw something today while I was looking back at scenes where it was like, well, they needed like a Challenger rocket to escape Earth's gravity, but then they use like a normal rocket to escape the water planet's gravity. I'm like, grow up.
It's also like there's a difference between a small little ship and like something the size of a little continent having to get launched into space.
Well, yeah, I mean that too, but also it's not really how rockets work. But shush.
I mean they do.
Still need a lot of thrust to get out of a higher gravity planet. But
Thrust.
yeah. But yeah, no. So like when they started like talking about like the more like science-y part of things, sometimes I was just like, yeah, like I'll just take that at face value and just assume they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
You can tell sometimes when things are like egregiously lying to you in science fiction, and sometimes you're just like, I just have to trust the author knows what they're saying.
Fair enough. But then we also get the better glimpses of her and her relationship to her brother and to McConaughey as he's watching back those videos.
Yeah.
You know,
My
Where-
favorite scene.
Definitely one of my favorite scenes too.
Yeah,
Such a
that was powerful. It hits hard.
Also, we haven't talked at all yet about Timothy Chalamet and Casey Affleck, the
Yeah.
brother.
This
Oh
movie
my
is
God, yeah.
this movie is full of like. I remember telling you this the first time I watched this. I was like, "Oh, they're in this movie. Oh, they're in this movie.
Yeah.
Oh, they're in this movie," and it just keeps like going on and on and on. And on. Like,
Yeah,
I know almost every. I've at least seen every actor in this movie in something else.
he
Where,
loves his ensemble cast.
That's pretty cool. Not my favorite ensemble cast. Inception still has
understandable.
number one, but it's definitely up there in terms of, especially because you think like Chastain. I mean, at this point, she's a bona fide star.
Yeah,
She's doing stuff like Zero Dark 30. She's got like
the Jurassic
Molly's
movies.
Game is happening. You say Jurassic?
Yeah, the Jurassic movies.
That's Bryce Dallas Howard.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, two redheads. They look the same.
Yikes.
Hey, you can't blame me.
It happens. It happens.
it's all
They
good.
do
Just
look
give me-
very alike.
I seriously thought that was the same person. That's hilarious.
You would not be the only one.
Because I saw
it's
the
a very
first film.
common.
I only saw the
joke.
first one of those
Yeah.
films, and I was like, "Man, this is terrible," and I never saw the other ones, so I completely blocked them
You
out of my
didn't
head.
miss anything.
I don't think I did.
And then like Casey Affleck, he's about I think a year or two away from doing Manchester by the Sea.
Mhm.
He's
His
always
defining.
been Ben Affleck's younger brother, so
Mhm.
just obviously the Nolan mainstays. And
And
then
the young-
McConaughey having his reconnaissance, or at least in the middle of it.
Yeah, his
It's like-
reconnaissance.
So, yeah, it makes sense why this movie costs so much money.
Yeah.
Visual effects aside.
Yeah. At this point in the film, we've seen enough of the practical effects, or just enough special effects
Yeah.
in general. I mean, Nolan is always regarded for his use of practical effects in his films. Did this first half of the film anything stick out in particular for you guys?
I really appreciated the starship designs.
Yeah.
Just as like just a general like I like spaceships kind of thing.
Just the design of the ships, because
Yeah.
I'm thinking like when they're actually showing them flying, and the use of like onboard cameras, stuff
Well, I
like
mean,
that to
yeah.
me is what I enjoyed.
But I mean like that, because like to me, starship always gonna look, the way you animate a ship flying through space, whether it's practical or not, always gonna have kind of a similar vibe to it, right?
Well, yeah.
So I tend to appreciate it based on how they actually look and like the sound design to them. A good example being the TIE Fighter, and just like
Iconic.
how they actually So like I appreciated just like the ring and like just the way the actual like little shuttles were and stuff, how everything docked and moved together. I was like, that's
Docked.
really shush. We're geeking about sci-fi. Let me be a geek. I just appreciate how everything kind of fit and moved together, and all felt very cool and mechanical while still being like futuristic without
Yeah.
being unnecessarily sleek like a lot of futuristic things.
It was
are.
a design we had not really ever seen,
Mm-hmm.
at least in terms of like there's 4 landers. It's a spinning thing
Mhm.
to be able
To
to
create
keep
gravity,
up the
yeah.
gravity. I thought that was cool. I mean, it makes sense when you think about like, oh yeah, they would need to not float for 15 years.
Yeah.
Like, they need actual gravity.
Yeah.
It makes sense that the ship would be floating to
Mm-hmm.
create that, or spinning to create that effect.
All right, and then we move on to spoiler alert. Guy Pearce shows up.
The second planet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ice planet.
Yeah.
Like you spoiler alert now after we've been talking about.
Well, when we
spoilers, like,
initially reviewed Interstellar,
Yeah.
because actual spoiler, Matt Damon was not a part of any of the marketing of this
Yeah.
film.
Oh, okay.
Nobody knew that he was going to be in it.
He put a Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, and then when he does show up in it, like I literally remember in
that's
the
one of the
theater,
moments where I was like, "What the hell? They got Matt Damon in this?"
because at that point you're like, oh, I know all of these famous
Yeah.
actors, and then
Yeah.
Matt Damon shows up, and you're like, he's in this too.
He's in none of the
Damn.
posters. He did none of the interviews.
Yeah.
He's like,
He
I
was
don't think he's
hidden the entire
credited
time.
it until the
Wow.
end or something like
Yeah.
that. And even then, I think it's very, very, very on the bottom of the credit list.
Mhm.
It's like it was literally one of the coolest cameos I've ever seen in a movie.
So when we first reviewed this in earliest episodes, we specifically called him Guy Pearce instead of Matt
Oh,
Damon.
fair
We
enough.
wanted to maintain the spoiler.
Yeah, the
for-
spoiler, but it is
Nolan.
Matt Damon.
It's 10
who
years
was in
now.
it.
Yeah, I think we could spoil it.
Especially because he's also like basically on the cover, for like all the advertisements for this
He's in a
movie now.
I think
Anyway,
he's in a round table for like their 5-year anniversary or something.
yeah,
And I'm
people
like,
know he's in it.
We got to keep kayfabe alive.
Yeah, maintain secrecy for 10 years.
Yeah, right.
Never deny it ever
Deny
having anything to
everything.
do
Yeah,
with
yeah,
this
yeah.
movie.
Good news is that those kind of things will always work on me because you'll say, "Oh, X actors in this," and I'm gonna have no idea who you're talking about.
Exactly. Case
Yeah.
in point,
Yeah.
Anne Hathaway.
Yeah,
Hey, I know. I mean, she's one of the few examples that I know them. I can put a face to the name. But you said Guy Pearce, and I was like, "Don't know who that is."
He
and then
was
you said
in-
Matt Damon. I was like, "Still don't know who that is."
Guy Pearce was the main actor in Memento, which was an older Christopher Nolan film. But I know you wouldn't know that. Anyway, we get to Matt Damon's planet, the centerpiece of the film for the most part.
Mm-hmm. On the cover.
On the cover, right? The ice world.
DVD.
Yep.
At this point in the film, are you, subdued to the movie's tricks and formulas, or do you feel like you're still watching like with a critical eye for the most part?
I mean, I think I was watching with a critical eye the entire time, if only because, like I kind of mentioned at the start, I was just looking for ways to make fun of Isaac.
But this is like the most, arguably, even more so than the black hole scene, the most intense part of the film.
Yeah.
You know,
This
least
is the
for-
point where I noticed you and Matt stopped talking. Because
Yeah,
you guys
that's
were
right,
making
yeah.
jokes all the
We
way
were-
up.
we were
In fact,
talking,
I think this specific planet was when you guys stopped talking, and I was like, oh yeah, they liked it.
it's gonna get serious.
Yeah. That's a good hallmark of does a person like a movie? Is that
That's a good hallmark of
This-
I really am enjoying myself.
As you stop talking.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
walk in and I just kind of focus.
Or you're just terrified.
Yeah. The design of the ice planet,
Pretty cool.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Jinx.
frozen clouds. It's pretty sick.
Yeah.
The fact that they bump into one on the way in
Huh.
and it chips off it, I'm like, oh, that's a good way to set things up.
Yeah.
Then we got the pretty cool. All right, cool. Whatever.
And then
It's a
you
nice
have.
joke.
You have the twist.
Oh, I get it.
You just put it together.
What'd you say?
I said it was pretty cool because it's
Oh.
an ice planet.
Yeah. Gotcha.
God, you guys, come on.
I think of cold instead of cool when it comes to ice.
I mean, yeah, but like, I can't say, oh, it's pretty cold. That's not wordplay.
Anyways, so the review
It's
of the
Coldplay.
betrayal.
The betrayal. He
Yeah.
wanted them to save
Spoiler.
him.
Yeah.
He knew the planet was bunk. Definitely, like, it's first off a bold move to introduce an antagonist almost an hour and a half into your
When
film.
you thought the antagonist was just time.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
When you're thinking, okay, how are we going to get back home? No, by the way, we also have to fight this guy. Like literally a side quest.
Yeah.
Just popping up halfway through. Definitely a bold move, I think. For the most part, at that point, I was just like, well, we're going to see McConaughey get home. It's just a matter of how he's going to overcome this next obstacle, you know? I mean, I think for the most part, because I had killed a guy on the last planet, I was like, well, who's going to die this time? Because it's either going to be Matt Damon or, possibly even Anne Hathaway at this point, And obviously it's not Anne Hathaway anyway.
R.I.P.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But definitely, one of those things where I think for the most part, I was just like, oh, that was really clever of him. All right. Can we get to the next planet?
I think this shows, or it sets up though, like he has to go forward.
Yeah.
Like, because when they're talking on the planet, him and Hathaway are like, oh, we can still go back. Like, we have enough fuel. We have enough time. Like, we'll make it back. We'll let them know, hey, we didn't make it. We'll go colonize Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not actually what they say. But in my head, that's what they're saying. But when Matt Damon's like, no, F you guys, I'm the captain now.
Yeah.
It's like, well, shit, we just wasted all our fuel, wasted a bunch of time. Like, now we have to go to the third planet.
Yeah. We can't go back home.
It sets
Yeah.
up that
Conflict.
plot conflict and also like just to continue further in the plot.
Mm-hmm.
which I think kind of was my takeaway of just like you're saying, you're like, okay, he has to get home, right? I think that was my point where I was like, okay, there's something like real going on here. Because I think up
Yeah.
to this point, I was like, this movie's cool, and like I'm appreciating it for what it is, but like, been there, done that
They
was
can
kind of
always
my
turn around.
Yeah.
thought process. Where I was like, yeah, I mean, I've seen time bullshit before. I've seen blah 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 blah. Yes, maybe when it came out, this was really fresh and stuff. But like to me at the time, I was like, it's cool. I'm appreciating it, but like
Yeah.
I wasn't like super locked in up until it was kind of more clear that like there is no going back. And I was
Mhm.
like, okay, now you have my attention. Like,
There's actual consequences.
yeah,
Yeah.
Actual stakes involved, right? Like if Matt Damon takes off, they're stuck on this planet.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I remember watching this scene the first time, and it's necessary. And I'm like, fucking right, it is. Let's
No.
go. And then bomb, bomb, bomb. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this is the greatest scene. This is my favorite scene.
And you also get freaking the IMAX camera
Yeah.
on handheld,
Yes.
like a madman.
It's the docking scene is. I still think I still get chills watching it from time to time.
It's definitely, I think, this like other than the black hole stuff, which I think most people just like talking about because the actual physics behind it
Yeah.
and how that's represented is cool. I think the actual docking scene is the one that I return to the most often because even just on its own in the vacuum, pun intended, it's still pretty like intense to
Yeah.
watch. And there are so many details in it too that are so fun.
The fact that she blacks out and he doesn't.
Yeah, because
He's like-
I mean, he has the training for it.
Yeah, the spinning of the wheel, the like, the ship is falling into the atmosphere of the planet and is
Yeah.
heating up. He has to like, there's just so much in it. Where I'm
Yeah.
like,
And I think that was one of
This
the
is
moments too
great
where I was
directing.
like, this is some really cool physics stuff because I like seeing gravity played with a lot. Because a lot of people just take it for granted and don't realize how crazy gravity can really be
Yeah.
as a force. So like you're saying, like oh, Nolan has training as a pilot to withstand super high G's, and so he didn't black out, whereas Hathaway did. I'm like that. I remember like at the time being like, yeah, because
that makes sense.
that's what happens when you're under like
Yeah.
a handful of
That's what
G's. You
G-force
just-
is.
She's
Stop.
like sitting there suspended in
Yeah.
the air.
Yeah.
Like your brain just
Yeah.
hard stops.
And also, probably, like you said, the best soundtrack.
Yeah,
Like that
I love
part in that
that
scene.
specific track in STAY Stay, the ending
Yeah.
song. I have those in one of my playlists. I listen to them a lot. I love those two specific tracks.
Definitely gets you hyped.
Yeah,
It's a good sequence.
Yeah.
I
For
watched
real.
this movie enough where I listen to that track and I know like
What
beat
part
for
is happening,
beat,
yeah.
like the shot, what it is.
Nice.
That tracks.
Yeah.
All right. They get off the planet. They live. Matt Damon goes bye-bye. Well, mid-speech gets blown out the airlock.
Great use of like, a
Silence.
jump scare,
Yeah.
basically.
Also, great use of what actually happens with the dramatic decompression of a space.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're always on that when we play our Alien Isolation, which, by the way, make sure to watch every Friday.
Listen, gravity and
No,
air. A lot
I-
of people don't comment on them enough. Two of the scariest forces that we
I
have
have
on
your
our planet.
back with that one. That one I won't even attempt to bait because that's fair.
I had seen 2001 prior, so I already knew
kind of
what it looked like.
understood,
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen Star Wars, Revenge of the Sith.
Anyway.
I saw the Magic School Bus.
Yeah. Takes his helmet off.
I remember that.
Iconic. I think I was traumatized for a while. That
I
scene.
mean, that's the first time I ever watched somebody die on screen.
Unironically, I think so as well. Yeah. His head got frozen. It was Arnold, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Arnold,
The redhead.
And then he was back in the next episode, like nothing happened. I'm like,
They literally just put him in the school bus, took him to Earth, and he defrosted. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, that makes sense.
yeah, as a kid, you're like, yeah, you don't realize that like,
4-year-old me was like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm an
the
idiot.
synapses in his brain are broken forever because it just froze over and no longer fires.
His body literally doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's shut
It just
down.
got ripped out of the suit.
Yeah. Anyway,
So yeah, they do the black hole slingshot.
Yeah, they do the black
they
hole
do the black hole
slingshot.
slingshot.
Best slingshot in movie history.
Can you name another one?
Yeah, Talladega Nights, the
Oh,
final
yeah,
one.
that's true.
Count Naughton Jr. Greatest redemption arc of all time.
Sorry,
Just saying.
You got me
I'm
there.
not prepared for on the list of movies that were going to be brought up in reference to
Interstellar.
As a comparison point, I was not prepared for Talladega Nights. Holy shit!
Shake
In my
and bake.
defense, Nolan is a huge fan of Talladega Nights.
He is, yes.
Fair enough.
And the Fast and Furious movies too.
And the Fast and Furious movies, yeah.
So obviously, I have some gripes with this part of it.
Okay, watching this in theaters, at this point I was just like, okay, just where are you gonna go with this? Like, you're gonna take your character into a black hole, which obviously you're not gonna kill your character. So what are you gonna do next? And the sequence of them like approaching the black hole, him saying bye bye, getting shot off into it.
What is it, Newton's third law?
Yeah, I'm like,
Which isn't how third law works, but whatever. Go on.
obviously, like, we're gonna leave Anne Hathaway alone for a while.
Yeah.
What are we gonna see with McConaughey? That was really just what I was focused on in that scene, because this is kind of a point in if you're trying to graph this story like in an arc, this would be kind of like the Dark Knight of the Soul moment, where that would be like where the character is at their lowest right before they come back and save the day. But obviously, given the progression of the story up until this point, you're thinking, well, how is he even going to get back home to save the day to see his kid? Where are you going to go with this? And that's where we get the Tesseract stuff, which just like
It's designed so cool.
it looks cool to look at, but in when seeing that for the first time, you're almost just like, to me, and I think I've said this before on the podcast, but sometimes when movies do stuff like that to me is when a film becomes a turn your brain off film. When you're like, I'm just not going to question this. I'm just going to watch
Just
it.
let it happen, yeah.
And then I'll think about it afterwards.
Well, I think even Coops even said that. He's like, how did this exist? He's like, and then Tara's on the radio. It's like, don't question it. It's just they're higher dimensional beings than we could ever fathom being. I was like,
Yeah.
all right, fuck it, you're
Yeah.
fair.
You know,
Like,
that's Nolan going, I can't put exposition here. I don't know what to say.
Like my favorite movie is a guy dressed up as a bat beating up people. Like
Yeah.
when a director tells me to turn my brain off,
You got
don't
it.
even question it. I got it.
Do you remember your thoughts and feelings when you watched this for the first time?
Specifically the Tesseract? A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I remember the black hole sequence happened. I remember making a mental note, like, I need to bring this up at the end. Because it was egregious. And then I was like, especially because the thing Isaac said was they had a person brought on to make the black hole as realistic as possible.
Anyway. On.
Sorry, I rewatched that sequence today and I'm still mad about it.
What, the fact that he went into a black hole?
No,
And didn't get
just
pulverized?
the slingshot part is actually him not being pulverized. I just movie magic, whatever. But like the slingshot itself shouldn't have worked. But when he
cost him
goes
150 years.
when he goes in, right?
Yeah.
At that point, like the second he started falling and he didn't go into paste, was when I was like, all right, cool. So like he's got some idea here. We're gonna see where he goes, right? And I think it was about when the Tesseract first started kind of showing up.
Unfolds.
Where I was like, damn, they really did some research for this, because like, it's playing with the concepts of not just relativity, but like quantum mechanics and like
Literal string theory.
Yeah, literal string theory. Like all things exist at once, but also don't. Which I mean, I've waxed poetically about to you a few times, I think, and stuff, and just like how much I appreciate that. So I think like the part of mine that was super annoyed at the slingshot was suddenly like shoved to the side and was like, all right, this is cinema. Like, I was like, I gotta walk in to appreciate what's going on here, because this is like, I hadn't seen anything really like that on film yet.
Yeah.
Nobody caught me by surprise. I mean, I know we talked about like what we heard about the movie going into it. I do not remember anything about going into a black hole being part of the movie.
Yeah.
Or when I was watching it in class, I was like, yeah, of course he goes into a black hole, because like, where else is he gonna go?
I think it's also the fact that you have the Matt Damon sequence, which is one of the most intense in terms of like the actual action that's going on, followed immediately by one of the most intense because you can't comprehend what it is that you're watching.
And like I've had descriptions of this kind of thing before, and you can describe it in words really well, but like making that into visuals, is, I mean, it's impressive that he was able to do anything that was even remotely understandable.
Yeah, there is one other film I think that set the precedent for that kind of sequence, and that is 2001: A Space Odyssey and its ending sequence. Have you ever seen that film?
I have not.
So, not to spoil the end, but the main character, Frank, goes through... Dave is his name. Frank is the other astronaut. Dave goes through a similar, more or less sequence in that film. It's far more abstract than it is in Interstellar. Like... its reputation as an LSD movie was warranted for that scene alone. But it's definitely like, and when you were watching that Sopranos thing, they bring up the way that they show him moving through time, completely different to how Nolan does it in this film. Nolan's way is actually probably more comprehensible the first time you're watching it than the way that they do it in 2001. But like, at the very least, like the previous attempt at showing what that kind of, look at a different dimension would feel like to experience, in 2001 was definitely much more, if you can even, imagine, conceptual and intellectual, or at least abstract with it than what Nolan does in this film.
Nolan felt like he took the math and tried to make it into structures.
Yeah, definitely much more material.
Which is what a Tesseract
Kubrick was definitely much more like just what would it like, how would you experience it, like almost what would it feel like to an extent. And that is by far, and it's a cool ass scene in my opinion, especially at the end of that film. But watching Interstellar, I wasn't thinking about 2001. I was still just like, what the heck am I looking at here?
Like, whoa.
What's happening?
Yeah, especially because by this point, like almost immediately, as soon as you see the Tesseract and then you see the scenes from previous, I knew exactly what was going to go on, what was going on, and what he was going to do, and everything else in the film clicked at that point because it's supposed to.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, okay, well, how do you get out of this now?
Yeah.
Where you go from here? You took him to the fourth dimension.
Yeah.
Do we
Just
go to
come
the
back.
fifth?
Yeah.
Do we go to the second? No.
I mean, I would appreciate it if you went
Second, they
flat.
started to 2D.
2D dimension. It becomes an animated movie.
Yeah,
It'd
yeah.
be pretty great. But yeah, I think at that point I was like, all right, cool. So he doesn't make it back. I'm like, that's the twist. Is that he, it all made sense, like you said. Or like it sets up all the way at the beginning that he does all of this just to tell his child, who he loves dearly, how to save humanity. And I was like, and then he sacrifices himself for it. I'm
Yeah.
like, that's great. So when the fact that it didn't, I was like, whoa, shit, all right.
We still have 30 minutes left in
Yeah,
this film.
yeah. That was literally the scene I had where I was like, there's 20 minutes left.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could have.
There's no way it's 20 minutes of credits.
Yeah, I was saying
Yeah.
you could have ended it with him dying and had him not in the rest of it at all, and I would have been okay with it. That's what I think my brain was at that point.
I feel like you couldn't do that. Well, okay, you could end McConaughey's story there.
Yeah.
You still have to go back to
that's
Jessica
what I meant.
to Murph and,
Like you still have to like explain that it worked.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, you could have also just been like, you could have wrapped it up with he reached out. You see that Murph understands, and then it cuts, and like that's it. Because like,
Oh, no.
No,
No,
I don't think
love
so
the
at all.
ending as is.
well, I mean, I like the ending a lot, but I'm just saying like that's still also a complete story. It leaves
Well, yeah.
you, the viewer, to be like, well, did it work? Like he gave her everything she needs. Are they going to actually do it or not?
You could do that if he hadn't made Inception previously.
Fair.
Nolan loves
Already
his
did
endings.
that. Yeah.
I mean, like, that's just going from storytelling, not just what his
No,
works are. What he
obviously,
knows,
yeah.
And like what I have learned to accept from a lot of sci-fi
Yeah.
media, which is just
That's true.
I don't know. Maybe they'll do it. Maybe they won't. Who knows? Good
Yeah.
luck. It's the idea. That's what the stories are
Yeah.
about.
So many science fiction stories end with, well, we've kind of caught up to our modern day understanding of the science.
Yeah.
We'll finish it when we
Yeah.
know more.
It's very common to have, like, well, the ending's what you make of it. And it's just like,
Oh, I didn't
Yeah,
make
okay.
much. But we do get the ending.
yeah, we do get the ending.
He falls out of the Tesseract, and then he gets rescued immediately.
Yeah.
And then, obviously we had to continue the story because then Nolan can show us that cool spaceship that curves in on itself.
Yeah.
Cooper Station.
He
Yeah,
had that
Cooper
design. He
Station.
wanted to
They
use
named,
it.
they named it after me.
With his house turned into a museum
Yeah.
with TARS still there.
Good old TARS.
Um,
Best part of the film.
by the way, cool robot design.
Very cool.
Oh, yeah.
design. Yeah.
The fact that he can automorph into anything.
Yeah.
Oh my god, he's so cool. I love
Anyway,
TARS.
the actual ending of the film.
Third favorite scene is when he sees Murph for the last time.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking kills me every time I watch it.
Yeah.
I love that scene so much.
Emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rare for a Nolan
And
film.
especially because those actors prior to that, like, that's good acting because they
Yeah.
didn't really have a relationship in terms of like actor to actor.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to convey all those feelings with two people who didn't have a lot of screen time together. I mean, that's why I think Jessica Chastain is like the greatest part of this movie.
Mm.
Is because you feel love for her father and you feel
Yeah.
like Matthew McConaughey is her father. Just the way she like gets mad at him, she cries. Like when she's breaking down when she finds out that Michael Caine didn't know the math the whole time and the equation was a bust, and she's like breaking down, crying to him. I was like, that's why is she not nominated?
Yeah.
And I feel the
genre
same
film.
way. I still feel the same way about the ending when they're sitting there talking and she's like, I knew you would come back. Why? Because my dad told me to. And then that like organ hits. I'm like, here come the waterworks. Every time. I love that ending.
Yeah. Or
At least to the ending in
Yeah.
terms of like their relationship.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
she came to
That was
terms.
the point I was gonna say.
He left. They reunited, and now he needs to go move on because
He has to go
he
find
can't
Anne
cling
Hathaway.
to the past. He needs
Yeah.
to move forward.
Yeah. I mean, that's
Yeah.
basically the takeaway. Yeah.
Do you feel like the ending wraps up the film?
Yeah, I felt
Pretty
like
well.
I mean, like I said, you could have dropped it 20 minutes and I would have been like, yeah, that's a good ending. So like it was just more of like adding on to what I already was appreciating. So I was like, yeah, Again, it plays with time stuff and I like watching that in action. So it's just, it was a good time all around. I can't really I don't really have anything else to say that Isaac didn't is really
It's
what it comes down
definitely
to.
one of those films where I feel like if you are at the beginning and like you can't possibly imagine where they're going to end up by the end.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, I
that
think that's-
ending in a way isn't built into the beginning because the beginning is I'm going to come back, I'm going to see you again, And where they end up by the end of the film is so different from what you possibly could have thought like how it would actually end, especially with all the like ghost stuff, you know? It's definitely, for me, I think really no other film really takes you on like an actual journey. Like you really feel like, because for the most part, you know, I've often talked about how I don't like when characters turn around or like return to previous places, right? And this film manages to not only turn the characters around, but they don't return to the same place. They like progress, even when he sees, by the time he sees Murph again, they're not on Earth any longer, you know? Like they've made their own progression too. And I don't know, for some reason that just is more cathartic to me, you know, just in terms of story structure, in my opinion. If he had like come back and they were still back on Earth, I'd be like, happy ever after, I guess. I don't know.
When he's looking out into space and he has a smile, and he's like, you just feel like a sense of, I don't want to say freedom, but like he has wonder, right?
Yeah.
He's no longer, I don't want to make it seem like he's a deadbeat dad, but he's no longer bound by his children. It's like he can go do cool stuff.
Your dad left to get the milk. Mine went to another planet.
I think it's just him coming to peace, right? With that, like he left Murph, they reunited, they rekindled, they forgave each other for what they did.
They saved humanity.
You know, he's gonna go forward now because you know he's only 40 years old and she's almost 100, or basically 100.
Crazy.
So I think like that's a great way.
Which is another just one of those things where I was just like, I like time. I like playing with time. Just that kind of concept is always just fun to me. And just doing stuff like that is always just a good time.
She's wearing the watch. That's great. Great little touch there. Only problem I have with that scene. Why is nobody else being like, yo, hello, great-great-great-grandpa? I don't know.
I mean,
20 people in the room and not one of them is like, oh,
probably didn't have many stories of him to tell.
I was just saying that, you know.
I guess Murph didn't really talk about it.
The movie was already going too long at that point. They're
No.
like,
It's definitely that's me nitpicking. I understood why they did it. I get it, but it's just I don't know. It's funny every time. So I watch it and he walks in and everybody's just like, takes a step back.
Yeah. So, Interstellar, as a whole, does it deserve its modern reputation as a classic of science fiction?
I think for sure.
Absolutely.
I think it should be up there in like, if you are a sci-fi buff, you should watch it.
Yeah.
It's not even like you should. It's a requirement.
Because its influence definitely, and you talked about this about it depicted the fourth dimension. Its influence has spread. You know, I think when we talk about like 2001: A Space Odyssey, we're talking about a time in science fiction where their understanding of these things was purely conceptual.
Yeah.
They could only really, conceptualize abstract ways of, thinking about these things. Now that Nolan has the math, at least, not just strictly speaking hard science fiction, but, our people got better at articulating those kinds of, like material formations of these abstract concepts to an extent, I guess I would say. So I definitely think its influence is more so in almost people's confidence,
I would agree with
representing that kind of stuff.
It re-legitimized the science fiction category for at least in terms of movie audiences.
Yeah.
Right?
Or it definitely gave, I think what I want to say more so is like, I think of a book like Tau Zero, for example, where the math is literally, there's just an equation on the page.
Yeah.
How it's baked into the story is really just up to your interpretation. It's like, yeah, here you go. Here's just the equation. Figure it out yourself.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Whereas now it'd be like, okay, we have a better language for how we actually like physically represent mathematical concepts. I think for the most part, that's more so the point that I want to make.
Yeah. Which I
S
think is,
tier?
I'd give it an S tier.
James?
I'd say it's S for sure. If for science fiction, not my favorite Nolan film personally, but definitely like. If somebody said that, I'm a big science fiction fan, and they said that they hadn't seen Interstellar,
You're like, what's wrong with you?
yeah, I'd be like, what is wrong with you?
You should go do
the
it.
Batman meme?
Yeah, slapping Robin.
I think this is my favorite Nolan movie.
Yeah.
I think so.
know.
I've been on the,
I said we know.
No, I've been very much like The Dark Knight is still number one to me. It's like this, Oppenheimer and Interstellar are obviously on their own tier. But I think this one's number one.
I feel like
I've been when people are like, "What's your favorite movie?" I've been putting this movie more and more into like, well, it's The Dark Knight, it's The Godfather, it's this, it's that.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I think about it, I'm like, this is the one movie I want to rewatch
The
more
most.
than any of his others. This is the one I want to see in theaters the most.
Yeah.
I'm very excited for the IMAX release. I'm gonna be there.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just something about this movie. I don't know if it's just space. I don't know if it's the soundtrack. I don't know what it is, but something about this movie just gets me excited.
Well,
every
you
time I
talked about
watch
that
it.
this was one of the first films where you really like felt within yourself like, oh, I want to make movies.
Yeah, this was the movie that like I was like, I'm going to film school.
Yeah.
For this, like this movie has just inspired me to go.
Yeah. So it's understandable why you would feel that way.
I don't know. It just touches the soul in ways that I can't describe. I don't know. Which doesn't make
He's
for very
getting
good.
teary-eyed.
Yeah, I'm getting a little teary-eyed.
Teary-eyed, guys.
This movie's good. I love this movie. Before we go, 2014, low-key, sneaky, goated movie year.
What came out?
I don't know.
So we have this.
I know he has a list.
We have John Wick.
Oh, yeah.
We have Whiplash, Paddington,
All right.
Gone Girl,
That's right. I saw when I was looking for the Grand Budapest Hotel.
Grand Budapest Hotel, Edge of Tomorrow, Ex Machina. Then we have action movies like Fury, The Equalizer. Then we have stuff like Nightcrawler, Lucy, which people highly debated, but I think it's still a movie that exists.
Talk about science
Oh
fiction,
my
am I right?
You have your Oscar biopics like The Imitation Game. You have An American Sniper. You have your good animated movie like Bear Hero 6. Speaking of heroes, you have Captain America, The Winter Soldier, X-Men Days of Future Past,
Guardians of the
and,
Maybe it was a
Galaxy.
good year for movies.
and The Amazing Spider-Man 2,
Mhm.
all in one year.
Guardians of the Galaxy as well, I think, came out
Guardians
that
of
year
the Galaxy
too.
as
That
well,
first year.
thank you. We had Birdman and Chef, which are pretty solid, like
Yeah.
after-school special kind of movies.
Birdman would definitely be my pick for that year,
We've
personally.
got really good comedies like 22 Jump Street and Neighbors. And then back to Oscar, we have Boyhood,
Mm-hmm.
Theory of Everything, our favorite monkey movie, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, the Lego movie,
Ooh.
The Fault in Our Stars. Obviously, that's not our demographic, but it's a movie that was very popular.
It was
for
a
the
pretty
year.
solid
That was
movie.
our demographic back in 2014.
The first Godzilla, which I didn't personally like,
But
but
I
I think
did.
you guys enjoyed that one.
Yeah.
What else? The Interview,
I remember that movie, Jesus Christ.
How to Train Your Dragon 2,
Go
Damn,
to
there
film.
was some really good fucking movies that came out that year. Holy crap.
and that's about the last one that I would say is good. There's a couple like trashy movies.
Oh, well, there
Like
always
Taken
is.
3, Dumber and Dumber 2,
Hmm.
Beauty and the Beast, the live action one, Unfriended.
You know, all of those in context, I still think that Birdman deserved the Oscar.
And that's
Who could
what we'll
forget
cut.
about who could forget about the Transcendence?
Oh God, rest in peace, Wally Fisher.
Yeah.
Wally Fisher was Nolan's cinematographer, like on all of his films, and then he quit cinematography to direct Transcendence.
Now he directs commercials,
Good for him.
which
It is good
still
for
a
him that
living
he's
career.
finding work.
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
make a pretty good money.
But
from
also
commercials.
his work on The Dark Knight, phenomenal. Have you
Yeah,
seen?
so those are some of
I
the
have.
movies
Okay,
that came out in 2014.
definitely a good year.
Yeah, you know,
Pretty good year.
it's-
I actually,
yeah.
I was like, what else came in? Because I wanted to come out and be like, 2014, Interstellar is the best movie of the year. And then I looked at the list and I was like, nah, it was like 5. You could probably make the
Yeah.
argument for.
Yeah.
I mean, the Lego movie's on there.
I was gonna say Lego movie.
Yeah, no, unironically, yes. Yes,
I would-
Lego movie's great. Yeah.
I mean,
love-
Isaac
I
mad
love-
at me. I would probably put Lego movies.
I can't even argue with that.
Yeah.
I personally wouldn't, but I can't argue with it.
I mean,
Nevertheless,
It's all
you know,
legitimate, yeah. So,
man,
I just thought it'd be a fun little exercise to go through.
Birdman is such a good movie.
What about for the 2010s? I know we've had this discussion with, I believe it was Parasite.
Mm-hmm. Now, for science fiction or just in general?
Just movies in general. Would you think this is one of the more iconic, not your best, but more iconic movies of the 2010s?
Well, definitely for more
yeah.
iconic films. I would
Just-
definitely think, in terms of theater experiences, it would almost certainly be like top 3.
I'm so
you
excited
know,
for the IMAX.
in my opinion.
I hope it's a day that doesn't screw us up for actually being able to go.
There's
Is
like
it-
4 days over
is it
2
4 days?
weeks.
Oh, okay, cool,
Yeah,
cool.
we'll
Mm.
find
We'll
a
make
day.
one
Yeah.
But definitely for like movie theater going experiences, this would definitely be up there for me.
I think that's why I love Nolan the most. It's just At the end of the day, he makes very fun movies to watch in theaters.
He makes movies for theaters.
Yeah.
He does not shy away from that.
Yeah.
Sound mixing be damned. He does not shy away from that.
Sound mixing be damned.
Unfortunately. But
This is why I have subtitles on everything I watch.
No!
he heard us talking shit. He heard us talking shit.
All right.
Anything else you guys want to finish off with?
No, I think that covers everything.
Any interest in? I think we've asked you this a couple times, but any interest in watching another Christopher Nolan movie?
Yeah, I mean,
We've mentioned Inception because that's always.
I don't think you're gonna let me not watch Inception at this point. So.
No, I've never been like you have to watch something
Yeah, you did.
other than The Godfather in this movie.
Yeah, it's like that's a bold-faced lie. I didn't have a choice in Interstellar.
Well,
You
it's,
put
you
it
know,
on.
it's you have to read certain books, you have to listen to certain songs to appreciate everything else. Is the way I look at it. Like,
No, yeah, I know, but don't say you never forced me to watch something. Don't lie.
very good at that.
Yeah.
James, any last words?
No. I said all I had to say.
Yeah.
Alrighty then.
Yeah, we've done it now 3 times.
Yeah.
I think people.
I can't wait for the 4th in 10 years.
Nah.
We'll meet up again in 10 years.
when they
When they come out with
Interstellar 2.
Yeah. Remind me 10 years.
Murph's Revenge. Or it could be like the Murph Chronicles. It's just
Yeah.
the period between when we saw her as Jessica Chastain and when we saw her as an old lady.
Yeah. It's gonna be a 2 Interstellar.
God damn. I was gonna make that joke.
Alright. Yeah. James,
What?
what should they do?
Oh, yeah. I legitimately thought you were going to ask me another question.
No.
Please subscribe, leave comments. We appreciate hearing from all of you.
Mm-hmm.
If you like Interstellar, then let us know what you think. If you didn't like it, if you thought it was too long, too boring, and that the acting sucked, leave a comment as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, let
If
us
you
know,
want to talk
chat.
about the science behind it with me in comments, I'll be
Go
looking.
tune into the Claire Murphy Science Corner.
Yeah.
New feed.
Murphy? Okay.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. Murphy's
Oh man,
Law.
I've definitely never heard that joke before.
Okay, bye.
Instagram. Follow us on Hit Play Down
He
Pod.
shouted that to
Instagram.
Instagram, no?
No, he didn't.
Oh, just the YouTube?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Instagram.
Sorry. Do the Instagram.
Hitplay.pod.
Go watch our Alien.
Yeah.
Go watch us talk about John Wick last week.
Mm-hmm.
Next week, we're doing a fun pod.
Yeah, it'll be a good.
It's a cool idea.
A good little
I like
chat.
the
Yeah.
idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's a,
James has them every once in a while.
Only every once in a while, though.
Yeah.
It's a good idea, though.
I think it's a great idea. I'm very
Anyways,
excited.
next week we're doing movies we're most thankful for. I promise none of Christopher Nolan's movies will be on my list personally.
And I'm not just going to talk about movies either. I have more
Yeah, so I
things to
think
say.
it's just it's
more
media.
Media.
Yeah. We're
Because I don't think
going to
I'm
be...
gonna have a single movie on there.
So we're gonna ban Christopher Nolan. We're gonna ban deep science fiction from you, and then what are we gonna ban from James?
Anything that wasn't made in America. Okay, that's a good one. That's a good one.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one.
No, I feel like that's everything that James has ever consumed. I feel like that's fair.
James' list went from like 72 to
Literally,
4.
I was like, well, shit.
I can see because you didn't get mad. You just started laughing because you're like she's right.
It's like, all right.
Here's the caveat: it has to have more than 100 IMDb reviews.
half my stuff's gonna be books.
No, I know. Yeah, more than 100 people have to have consumed this piece of media.
Hope you're ready for the Pokemon the movie.
All right, guys.
See you next week.